Dealing with difficult people is a fact of life. Everybody has to deal with difficult people. Nobody gets to escape that. It's just part of the human condition. And I certainly have to deal with difficult people. You know, with over 1,000 active participants in this religious community, there is a few difficult people here that I have to deal with. And you might think that with all these years of doing this work, that I might be some kind of an expert at dealing with difficult people. But I just have to confess, there's this one guy. I mean, I haven't got a handle on how to deal with this guy. He drives me nuts. He's always making stupid jokes. He wants to be the center of attention in every group. He takes on too many obligations because he's really enthusiastic and gets all excited, and then he comes through at the very last minute, and everybody is just like on pins and needles waiting for this dude. He just can't keep track of details and always needs to be reminded of stuff. I shouldn't do this, but I'm going to tell you who it is so you can look out for him. It's me. It's me. The first thing to keep in mind when learning how to deal with difficult people is to remember that for somebody, you are the difficult person. It's guaranteed. We are all the difficult people in somebody's life. Because we have such a blessing of this wonderful diversity in humanity, there are going to be people that we love and care about immediately and just get along with great. And then there are going to be people that just really rub us the wrong way. That's guaranteed. And there's going to be conflict, and it might be the same people at different times. This is just a fact of life. Now, Jesus presented us with a very powerful teaching in the reading from Matthew earlier, when he talked about making sure that you take the plank out of your own eye before you try the delicate operation. Remember, that's a delicate operation of removing the speck of sawdust out of your brother's eye. Because what he's talking about is the fault that you find in the other person and trying helpfully to remove it. What he's saying is that we unconsciously have the very same fault, but in greater degree. They have a speck of sawdust. We have a plank. Now, this is an ancient teaching, more than 2,000 years old, but depth psychologists really have noticed this as well, and they call it projection. So what's projection? It's that there are certain parts of ourselves that as they emerge as we're young children, they are discouraged, or our culture discourages it, or they just somehow we get a negative reaction from the people we care about and depend on, and they get stuffed, and we don't even acknowledge that they're part of who we are. We're just not equipped to face these things that are true about us. So we are discouraged from owning them at a really early age. I mean, there are some cultural things, like, for instance, a lot of women have trouble owning their anger. Sometimes men have trouble owning their grief, their sadness, and their fear. But, you know, we all have unique histories, and we all have our own traits that we just don't even want to see or acknowledge, and kind of push them into unconsciousness. The psychologist Carl Jung called that whole bundle of messy instinct that we don't even acknowledge the shadow. And there was a radio show about the shadow knows, right? Well, If you see something in another person that absolutely drives you nuts, this is what this amounts to. If you see something in a person that you just can't stand, there's almost certainly a chance that you can't stand that in yourself, to the point where you don't even want to acknowledge that that's part of you. You can be pretty sure if somebody just irritates you and drives you crazy, that it's something about you. As we say in 12-step groups, if you spot it, you've got it. So, here's a chance to grow. If that difficult person is telling you something about yourself, and if you could acknowledge and own that part of yourself, then actually it helps to heal. It gives you energy and vibrancy and insight that you didn't have. You reclaim that energy for yourself. You become a more whole human being. And that shadow, it doesn't get dragged around as much to harm other people unconsciously. Remembering that all of us are difficult people to somebody sometimes, the first thing to remember about dealing with difficult people is to always treat them with respect. Jesus said, love your enemy. He didn't mean, embrace them. He didn't mean invite them to coffee every Friday. He said, basically what I mean is treat them with respect. Treat them the way you would like to be treated. The difficult people. Yes, even that one. Yes, that one. Difficult people and dealing with difficult people is a difficult spiritual practice. Now, while we all need to deal with difficult people, whether we learn and grow from it is our own choice. It takes emotional intelligence and emotional maturity to do it well. Dealing with people who are difficult for us is something everyone is going to screw up often. It's our choice whether to learn from it. And then we can grow. That's how we get that emotional intelligence. That's how we develop that emotional maturity. As I confessed, I'm now expert in dealing with difficult people, but there are some things that I've found to be helpful. The first is, if you're going to deal with a difficult person, stick to behavior that you have observed. Don't psychoanalyze them. You don't have a license. Or maybe you do, but still, if you're involved, stick to observed behavior. Especially don't psychoanalyze them to their face. They won't find it helpful. Maybe you've noticed. But you have an issue with their behavior, and you value the relationship, then it can be dealt with. And believe it or not, it can be dealt with some skill and some tact and some respect and some compassion. So stick to observed behavior. The other thing is a cliche. And the reason it's a cliche is because it is very true. And that is, if you're going to have a difficult conversation, always use I language. For instance, when you said that thing about how I was attached at the hip to my mother, I felt angry and insulted. That's using I language. You're stating a fact. The person did that. You observed the behavior. You're stating the fact of how you reacted. You didn't psychoanalyze. I think you stink is not I language, by the way. And you need to really watch yourself. So we do sometimes need to clear up these misunderstandings because the relationship we have with people matter to us. Either we're tied to those people, we love them, we're their family, their friends, their partners, we're in relationship with them, or we're in relationship with them because they're part of our communities or in our workplace. And so it's good to confront these issues, but it's also good to pick your time if you can. If you're angry at someone, you can tell them, but it's better if you tell them when you're no longer angry and use that I language. Now, to respect someone doesn't mean that you have to take repeated abuse or disrespect. Again, the way to deal with that is through I language. A raised voice, sarcasm, name-calling. You don't have to take that without responding. That's hurtful, that you don't like it, that you want it to stop. One thing you can do if you're in that situation with that angry person is to change your posture. We might want to back up, but if you move in, if it's not a violent confrontation, they have to change the energy when you change your energy. And if they say something sarcastic or abusive, one really good tactic is to ask them to clarify their intent. When you said the thing about how I'm joined to the hip with my mother, I found that to be sarcastic. Was that your intent? That can really interrupt that whole thing. And try not to be accusatory. It's difficult, but to ask that conversation about when a sarcastic or abusive comment asks, what was the message you were trying to communicate when you said, and quote them. It can really diffuse that situation right away. Some people you can just stay away from if they're abusive or disrespectful. And that's an option. If you can stay away from people who are toxic in your life without hurting your life, do it. But there are some relationships that are just too important or you can't avoid. And here it's that great spiritual practice. This wonderful spiritual practice of dealing with those difficult people. In a large temple near the town of Sukhothai, which is in Thailand, it's the ancient capital of Thailand, there stood an enormous clay statue of the Buddha. Now, this statue wasn't any particularly great example of Buddhist art, but the local people revered it because, it had stood for over 200 years. It had survived all kinds of weather, all kinds of storms, invading armies, changes of government, social upheaval. And that clay statue of the Buddha stood there the whole time. So the people loved it. But after a period of particularly dry and hot weather, these cracks started to appear in the clay. And the townspeople were wondering how they could restore or preserve this wonderful and important artwork, this sacred art of theirs. And a particularly large crack appeared one day, and a curious monk got his flashlight shone it in there, into that big crack in that Buddha. And coming back at him was the illumination of pure gold. Nowadays, if you travel to Sukhothai in Thailand, you can see one of the largest gold statues of the Buddha in the world. The people had put that clay over the gold in some kind of upheaval, some kind of danger, to protect their sacred art. And they forgot that underneath what is essentially mud was gold. Well, we're like that. Our core is gold. Our true self is the Buddha nature. Or as Christians say, we are made in the image of God. Or as the Unitarian preacher William Ellery Channing said, we have the capacity for a likeness to God. That there is within us compassion and wisdom, and that we each have spectacular and wonderful gifts that are unique to us, that the world needs and the people we care about can benefit from. But at some point in our lives, we decide we need to protect ourselves, so we put the mud on, and we forget. We forget what's underneath, that there's gold underneath. When we deal with difficult people, we're looking at the mud, the protection, those layers that they felt were necessary to protect that precious thing that is their true selves. Maybe you can see a crack. Maybe somewhere shining through is the preciousness of that person. Maybe you can bring it out by treating them with respect and compassion and kindness. There's something I didn't tell you earlier about this projection thing where we project things on other people that are true about us, but we don't see it. Projection is not entirely about negative things. We also project on other people positive things about ourselves that we're afraid to own for some reason. If we hold someone in reverence and project all good things, even things that no human being could be capable of, some kind of perfection on them, you can be pretty sure that what you're projecting on that person is some of your beauty, some of your wisdom, some of your gold. As the spiritual teacher Marianne Williamson puts it, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light and not our darkness that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Wow. You know, maybe that's the best way to deal with difficult people. To live from our own best selves so that we can help by our being and our presence to liberate those around us. May it be so. And amen.